In a town where prejudice silenced hope, one woman's courage sparked a revolution over a single cup of coffee. Meet Lena Harris, a young diner owner in Fairview, Ohio, who stood up for a Hell's Angel against a hostile town, risking everything for a stranger's dignity. When her kindness was met with betrayal, something extraordinary happened. Hundreds of bikers roared in to prove that compassion can shatter even the hardest hearts. This is a story of bravery, redemption, and the power of seeing the person, not the patch. Will Lena's defiance change Fairview forever? Watch to find out, and if this tale of heart and hope moves you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to catch more stories that stir the soul. Let's dive in. In a dying town where hope was as scarce as rain, Lena Harris poured her soul into a diner that refused to quit. At 28, she stood behind the counter of Harris Diner in Fairview, Ohio, her hands rough from scrubbing grease, her heart heavy with the weight of keeping her mother's legacy alive. The air carried the sharp tang of burnt coffee and sizzling bacon, a scent that clung to Lena like a second skin. To her, it wasn't just a smell, it was home, a fragile thread tying her to a past when Fairview buzzed with life. Now, the town's empty storefronts and cracked sidewalks whispered of jobs lost and dreams packed away. Lena's diner, once the heart of the community, was bleeding out, its flickering lights a countdown to a future she couldn't bear to face. Every clink of the near-empty cash register twisted her stomach tighter, the math never adding up. The electric bill was overdue, stamped with red ink that screamed urgency, and her mother's heart medication costs loomed like a storm cloud. Clara Harris, once the diner's vibrant soul, now lay frail in Fairview General, her strength stolen by illness, but her lessons etched deep in Lena's bones. Treat people by their deeds, Lena, not their looks. Those words were Lena's anchor, steadying her as she fought to keep the diner's doors open. She'd left a promising job in Columbus 2 years ago, trading ambition for duty when her mother's heart began to fail. Now, wiping down the worn countertop for the third time that morning, Lena caught her reflection in the polished chrome of the coffee-tired eyes, tight curls pulled back, a face that carried both resolve and quiet fear. The breakfast rush, if you could call it that, had dwindled to 3 farmers and a lone trucker, their hushed chatter barely filling the silence. Outside, Main Street lay deserted, the kind of stillness that pressed against Lena's chest like a stone. She glanced at a faded photo on the wall. Clara, laughing behind this very counter, her apron tied with pride. "Just a little longer, Mama," Lena whispered, her voice cracking with a mix of love and desperation. The bell above the door hung silent, its jingle a memory of better days. Lena's fingers traced the edge of the counter, grounding herself against the ache of what might come next. But in that quiet moment, something stirred a stubborn spark of hope, faint but unyielding, fueled by her mother's words and the diner's stubborn refusal to die. Little did Lena know, that spark was about to ignite a fire that would change Fairview forever. Just as Lena whispered her promise to keep the diner alive, the bell above the door sang out, sharp and startling, slicing through the heavy quiet of Harris Diner. The sound jolted her from her thoughts, and she turned, dishcloth still clutched in her hand, to face a stranger who filled the doorway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his black leather jacket worn and dusty, creased from countless on the open road. A gray beard framed his weathered face, and a tattoo snaked up his forearm, hinting at stories Lena could only imagine. But it was the patch on his chest, a grim, skeletal reaper gripping a scythe, the unmistakable mark of the Hell's Angels that sucked the air from the room. The few customers froze. Old Mr. Peterson's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips, his eyes narrowing. Sarah Klein, perched at a booth with her lesson plans, let out a small gasp, her pen clattering to the table. Even the ancient radio on the counter crackled with static, as if Fairview itself braced for trouble. Lena's heart thudded, but her mother's words echoed like a steady drumbeat. Judge by deeds, not looks. She swallowed her nerves, grabbed a cloudy plastic menu, and filled a glass with water, her movements deliberate, grounding. The biker, Jack Sullivan, moved to the farthest stool at the counter, his boots thudding against the linoleum with a slow, heavy rhythm, like a warning. He sat, shoulders hunched, as if trying to shrink his imposing frame, to blend into the faded red vinyl and chipped formica. Lena approached, forcing her voice into the warm cadence she offered every customer. "Welcome to Harris Diner," she said, setting the menu down. "Specials meatloaf with gravy, fresh this morning." Jack looked up, and Lena's breath caught. His hazel eyes, rimmed red with exhaustion, weren't those of a man spoiling for a fight. They were hollow, haunted, carrying a weight that made her think of her mother's hospital room. "Coffee," he rasped, voice like gravel scraped raw. "Black. Been on the road since dawn." Lena poured from the battered pot, her hands steady despite the tension prickling her skin. She noticed his hands large, calloused, trembling faintly as he reached for the mug. A hospital bracelet peeked from beneath his cuff, its plastic edge catching the light. Her chest tightened. She'd seen that look too many times in Fairview General's wards, in the faces of people clinging to hope. "Long road ahead?" she asked, keeping her tone light but kind. Jack nodded, his gaze dropping to the coffee's dark swirl. "Fairview General," he said, voice thick. "My boy, Tim, leukemia." The word cracked, breaking apart like glass under strain. Lena's throat tightened, a lump rising she couldn't swallow. She didn't press, didn't pry. Instead, she offered a gentle smile. "Eggs and toast, 6 minutes." "On the house." Jack blinked, surprise flickering across his face, but he nodded, murmuring a quiet, "Thanks." As Lena turned to call the order to the kitchen, she felt the weight of every stare in the diner, suspicious, disapproving, fearful. Sarah's wide eyes pleaded for caution. Mr. Peterson's frown carved deeper lines into his face. Lena knew what this moment could cost her. Fairview was a small town, quick to judge and slow to forget. But she also knew what was right, and her mother's lessons weren't just words, they were a fire in her bones. She wouldn't back down. Not when a man sat before her, not as a biker, but as a father fighting for his son. The air grew heavier, the silence taut, as if the diner itself waited to see what would happen next. Little did Lena know, the real storm was about to walk through that door. No one could have foreseen the storm that crashed through the diner's door, shattering the fragile calm Lena had fought to maintain. The bell above Harris Diner's entrance rang out, harsh and jarring, like a blade slicing through the tense silence left by Jack Sullivan's quiet presence. Lena didn't need to look up to know trouble had arrived. She felt it in the sudden stiffening of the air, in the way Sarah Klein's pen froze mid-word, in the sharp clink of Mr. Peterson's mug hitting the table. Officer Tom Carver strode in, his boots tapping an uneven rhythm on the linoleum, his badge catching the sunlight in a glint that felt more like a threat than a promise. Behind him, Deputy Ellen Hayes followed, her posture rigid, her eyes darting uneasily between Lena and Jack. Tom's gaze locked onto the biker, still hunched over his coffee at the counter's far end, and a slow, ugly smirk curled his lips. "Well, look at this," he drawled, voice loud enough to carry across the diner. "Didn't expect to see your kind in Fairview, Reaper." Jack didn't flinch, his hands steady around his mug, but Lena's pulse roared in her ears. She gripped the counter's edge, heat flushing her cheeks as she sensed the diner's fragile balance teetering. "He's just here for breakfast, Tom," Jack said, his voice low, respectful, but firm, like a man who'd faced this kind of scrutiny before. Tom sauntered closer, leaning an elbow on the counter, deliberately crowding Jack's space. "Maybe we should check your ID," he said, glancing at Lena with a mocking tilt of his head. "What do you think, Lena? Make sure he's not one of those reapers. We got bulletins about drugs, guns, the works." Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. Jack had done nothing. Nothing but sit, sip coffee, and speak of his sick son. But Tom was circling like a vulture, hungry for a fight. When Jack reached slowly for his wallet, Tom's hand twitched toward his holster, a reflex that sent a jolt of fear through Lena. She stepped forward, her voice sharper than she intended, cutting through the diner's stifling air. "He's a paying customer, Tom, same as anyone who walks through that door." The words hung heavy, a line drawn in the sand. Tom turned, his smirk widening, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "That's rich, Lena," he said, gesturing at the Reaper patch on Jack's jacket. "You know what that means? Trouble. The kind Fairview doesn't need. Jack lifted his gaze, meeting Tom's stare with a calm, unyielding strength. You don't know me, he said, his voice a low rumble, steady as stone. Tom barked, humorless and sharp. I know enough to not trust a man wearing that death patch. Lena's hands trembled now, but she planted them on the counter, anchoring herself. The diner was a sea of eyes, Sarah's wide with worry. Mr. Peterson's narrowed in judgment, the truckers shifting uncomfortably. She felt their silent pleas to stay quiet, to not make waves in a town that clung to its unspoken rules. But her mother's voice rose above the fear, clear and unshakable. Judge by deeds, not looks. You don't have the right to harass someone just because you don't like their jacket, Lena said, her voice steady despite the knot of dread in her chest. He's done nothing wrong. Tom straightened, his expression hardening, the smirk replaced by something darker. You're making a big mistake, Lena, he said, his tone low, laced with warning. Fairview doesn't take kindly to folks siding with trouble. The air grew thicker, the silence deafening, as every soul in the diner waited for Lena's next move. Jack pushed his plate away, reaching for his wallet. But Lena slid her hand across the counter, stopping him. Breakfast's on me, she said firmly, her eyes locked on his. Jack blinked, a flash of something gratitude, maybe relief crossing his weathered face. Tom snorted in disgust, tossing a crumpled dollar onto the counter like a challenge. Let's go, Ellen, he snapped, turning on his heel. Ellen hesitated, her gaze lingering on Lena with a flicker of something like respect, or maybe pity, before following Tom out. The bell gave a sour jangle as the door swung shut, leaving the diner in an uneasy hush. Lena busied herself wiping the counter, ignoring the whispered murmurs sprouting like weeds behind her. Jack finished his coffee in 2 quick gulps, slipping a $20 bill under his mug despite her protests. He stood, adjusting his jacket, and met her eyes. Jack Sullivan, he said simply. Lena Harris, she replied, offering a small, genuine smile. Safe travels, Jack. He nodded, a deep, solemn gesture, and walked out into the blazing Ohio sun. Lena watched him go, a tight ache blooming in her chest. She had no illusions about what this would cost. Fairview's memory was long, its temper short, and she'd just crossed a line most never dared to touch. The weight of that choice settled over her, heavy but resolute as the diner's quiet hum resumed, masking the storm that was surely gathering outside. But the storm Lena feared didn't wait for morning it struck, the moment Jack Sullivan's silhouette faded into the Ohio sun, leaving Harris Diner to face the wrath of a town that didn't forgive defiance. The air inside the diner grew heavier, as if the walls themselves absorbed the weight of Lena's choice to stand up to Officer Tom Carver. She wiped the counter in slow, deliberate strokes, ignoring the whispered conversations that bloomed like thorns behind her. Sarah Klein slipped out without a word, her lesson plans clutched tight, her eyes avoiding Lena's. Mr. Peterson lingered only long enough to drop a $1 tip, his usual 5 replaced by a silent judgment. By afternoon, the trickle of customers dried up entirely, the bell above the door hanging mute. Its jingle, a ghost of better days. Lena stood alone behind the register, staring at the near-empty tip jar, its few crumpled bills mocking her. The math was cruel. Without customers, the diner couldn't survive another month, let alone pay for her mother's heart medication. Her chest ached with a familiar dread, the kind that had haunted her since she left Columbus to save this place. Fairview was a small town, its heart as hard as its memory was long, and Lena had crossed an unspoken line. She'd chosen a Strangera biker, a reaper over the town's rigid code, and now she'd pay the price. As she flipped the open sign to close that evening, her sneakers scuffing against the worn linoleum, she spotted a crude cardboard sign taped to the glass door. Scrawled in angry red marker were the words, "No biker lovers, keep trouble out." Lena's stomach plummeted, a cold wave of shame and fury washing over her. She ripped the sign down, her hands shaking as she crumpled it into a tight ball. But the words seared into her mind, sharp as a brand. She tossed it into the alley trash barrel, watching it curl and blacken in the flames she lit. But the message lingered, a poison she couldn't burn away. Alone in the diner, Lena sank into a booth, her face buried in her hands, the weight of the day pressing down like a stone. She hadn't wanted a fight, hadn't asked to be a hero. All she'd done was see a man, not a patch, and offer him a meal when he needed it most. But Fairview saw betrayal, and its silence was louder than any insult. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, Clara, lying in Fairview General, her once strong frame now fragile under a thin hospital blanket. That night, Lena walked the quiet halls of the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, the scent of antiseptic sharp in her nose. She paused at room 108, her fingers brushing the doorframe before pushing it open. Clara lay still, the soft beep of the monitor marking each labored breath. Lena pulled a chair close, sitting slowly, and took her mother's hand, its warmth a faint echo of the strength that had raised her. "Hey, Mama," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Tough day at the diner. I might have picked a fight with the sheriff." A small, tired laugh escaped her, but it faded quickly. "Not on purpose, I swear, but you taught me to stand up when something's wrong. There was this man, a biker. Everyone else saw trouble, but he was just a dad, scared for his kid. And the way Tom treated him like he wasn't even human." The monitor clicked softly, indifferent, but Lena pressed on, her voice steadier now. "I don't know if I did the right thing. The town's turning on me, Mama. No one came today, and someone left that awful sign. They think I betrayed Fairview just for showing kindness." Her eyes burned, but she blinked back tears, refusing to let them fall. "But I keep hearing your voice judged by deeds, not looks. That man didn't need judgment. He needed grace." She leaned closer, her thumb stroking Clara's hand, a gesture her mother had done for her as a child. "I scared myself today, standing up like that, but I didn't back down. I think you'd be proud." Silence settled, broken only by the hum of machines. Lena sat there, letting her mother's steady breathing anchor her, a reminder of the woman who taught her to carry heavy loads with quiet strength. As she rose to leave, kissing Clara's hand, a stubborn ember of resolve glowed in her chest. She'd face whatever came next, because backing down wasn't who she was. The diner was more than a building. It was her mother's dream, her family's heart, and she'd fight for it, even if Fairview turned its back. Lena stepped into the night, the hospital's glow fading behind her, unaware that the tide was about to turn in ways she could never imagine. If this story of courage and compassion moves you, please hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels more stories like Lena's, stories that remind us how one small act can change everything. Join us to keep these tales alive. Let's inspire each other, one story at a time. Just when Lena thought the darkness of Fairview's rejection would swallow her whole, a roar from the horizon shattered the silence, promising a dawn she never dared to dream. The morning after the hateful sign burned to ash, Lena unlocked Harris Diner's door at dawn, her eyes gritty from a sleepless night haunted by the town's scorn. The ember of resolve she'd felt at her mother's bedside flickered, fragile against the weight of an empty diner. By 9 a.m., the coffee pot sat cold, untouched, the usual hum of breakfast chatter replaced by a stillness that pressed against her chest. "Mr.?" Peterson didn't show for his morning paper. Sarah Klein's booth remained empty, and the truckers who once filled the counter with laughter were nowhere to be seen. Lena wiped already spotless counters, her hands moving to keep despair at bay, but the near-empty tip jar stared back, a cruel reminder of the diner's fading pulse. At noon, she stood alone behind the register, the math of survival growing bleaker with every tick of the clock. Harris Diner, her mother's legacy, was slipping through her fingers, and with it, the money for Clara's medication. Lena's throat tightened, but she clung to her mother's words judged by deeds. Not looks like a lifeline, even as Fairview's silence screamed betrayal. Then, the bell above the door jingled, a tentative note in the oppressive quiet. Lena looked up, expecting a lost traveler or a delivery mix-up, but two strangers stepped inside, their presence shifting the air like a gathering storm. The man, lean and weathered, wore faded jeans and a jacket pinned with a silver skull, understated but unmistakable. Beside him stood a woman, her gray hair woven into a braid, her denim vest patched with the same Reaper insignia, her eyes soft with a warmth that eased Lena's nerves. Lena Harris? The man asked. His voice steady but kind. Lena nodded, tension creeping into her spine. I'm Carl Sullivan, Jack's brother. This is my wife, Marie. Lena's shoulders softened, a flicker of relief breaking through her guard. She stepped from behind the counter, shaking their hands, firm and respectful. How's Tim? She asked, her voice low, remembering Jack's son. Carl's face clouded for a moment. Still fighting. They're trying an experimental drug last shot. Lena swallowed hard, her chest aching for a boy she'd never met. Marie stepped forward, her smile gentle but fierce. Jack told us what happened, how you stood up to the police, treated him like a person when no one else would. You didn't see the patch, you saw the man. Lena shrugged, her cheeks warming. He needed a meal, not a fight. Carl's faint smile held a knowing edge. Sometimes those are the same thing. Lena offered them coffee, pouring slowly to steady her trembling hands. Something about their presence felt heavy, significant, like the hush before a summer thunderstorm. They sipped in silence for a moment, the diner's quiet wrapping around them, until Carl set his mug down with a soft clink. We wanted to do something to say thank you, he said. Not with money, with support. Lena tilted her head, puzzled. Support? Marie's eyes sparkled. Give it a few minutes. Then it began a low rumble, distant at first, like thunder rolling over the Ohio plains. It grew louder, closer, a primal growl that vibrated through the diner's walls. Lena stepped to the window, her breath catching in her throat. Down Main Street, the horizon shimmered with chrome, a wave of motorcycles flooding into view, their engines snarling like a waking beast. Dozens, then hundreds, they men and women, young and old, their leather jackets and helmets stitched with reaper patches from chapters across the state. Some carried small bouquets, others bore flags snapping in the breeze, but all moved with a shared purpose. The noise swelled to a deafening roar, then softened as engines cut off, replaced by the murmur of boots on asphalt and voices mingling like a migrating herd. Lena stood frozen, her heart pounding, and turned to Carl, her voice barely a whisper. What is this? Marie's smile widened. Jack told his chapter about you. They told others. Word travels fast in our world. You treated one of us like family. That means something. Lena's voice caught, a lump rising in her throat. But there's over 200 people. I don't have enough food. Carl grinned, a spark of mischief in his eyes. Taken care of. We called your suppliers last night. Trucks are on their way, costs covered. Lena's knees weakened, her mind reeling as the reality sank in. She pressed a hand to the window, watching the sea of leather and chrome fill the parking lot, overflow onto the sidewalk, and stretch down Main Street. Riders dismounted, stretching, talking softly, some tipping their helmets to her through the glass. Across the street, Fairview's locals gathered, peering from porches, whispering behind curtains, their curiosity warring with suspicion. Then the bell rang again, and the first rider stepped inside, respectful, quiet, nodding to Lena like she was someone who mattered. They filled booths, leaned against walls, took seats wherever they could. Lena stammered, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and panic. I can't serve all these people. Marie placed a hand on her arm. You won't alone. We've got you. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled up, crates of eggs, bread, and meat stacked high, as if summoned by magic. Lena's breath hitched, a giddy relief flooding her chest, but beneath it, a fierce, burning hope took root. Harris Diner wasn't just surviving, it was becoming something more, something bigger, and the roar of those engines was only the beginning. No one could have predicted that the roar of chrome would become the heartbeat of a town reborn, but as Harris Diner filled with leather-clad reapers, Lena Harris stood at the center of a miracle unfolding. The sea of motorcycles outside, gleaming under the Ohio sun, had stunned Fairview into silence, but now the diner buzzed with life, its walls straining to hold the crowd that poured in. Riders with weathered faces and calloused hands took seats beside empty booths, their reaper patches bold but their manners soft, nodding to Lena with a respect that made her heart stutter. The delivery trucks, summoned by Carl and Marie's foresight, arrived just as promised, Crates of eggs, bread, and meat stacked high at the back door like an answered prayer. Lena, still reeling from the sight of over 200 bikers, moved like a whirlwind, shouting orders to the kitchen, refilling coffee pots, and sliding plates of burgers and fries to waiting hands. She called in help church, youth group kids, a few neighbors who'd never been her biggest fans, but no one hesitated. There was something electric in the air, a shared understanding that this wasn't just a meal. It was a moment that could change everything. Across Main Street, Fairview's locals lingered, their whispers turning from suspicion to curiosity. Then, slowly, they crossed the invisible line. Jake Miller, Lena's old high school friend, stepped inside, his crooked grin cutting through the chaos. "Still got those biscuits?" he asked, eyeing the sea of leather jackets. Lena laughed, wiping sweat from her brow. "You'll have to share a table, Jake." He slid into a booth beside a woman with a pink mohawk and a patch reading "Reapers Never Quit," their chatter sparking like a match. Sarah Klein followed, hesitant at first, but soon deep in conversation with a biker who shared her love of gardening, their laughter mingling with the clatter of plates. Even Mr. Peterson, who'd left $1 the day before, shuffled in, taking a seat near a young rider who taught him to play dominoes, their table erupting in cheers with every slammed tile. The diner, once a ghost of itself, pulsed with possibility, its faded red booths and chipped counters glowing under the weight of something new: connection, hope, the breaking of old walls. Lena paused at the pass-through window, catching her breath, her chest swelling with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. This was her mother's dream, a place where no one cared about the patch on your back or the color of your skin, just good food and shared stories under one roof. Then the bell jingled again, and the room hushed as Jack Sullivan stepped through the door. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jacket dusty from the road, but a faint smile tugged at his lips, a flicker of light in his weary face. "Hope you don't mind," he said, voice quiet but thick with emotion. "Brought some friends." Lena crossed the room, meeting him halfway, her voice trembling. "Saved you a seat, Jack." He nodded, and for a moment, their shared silence spoke louder than words. The gratitude of a father, the courage of a woman who'd seen him when no one else would. The crowd parted as another figure entered, his presence commanding the room like a thunderclap. Frank Dawson, president of the Riverside Reapers, was massive. His white beard thick, his leather vest stretched across a broad chest, marked with bold patches and the heavy words, "President MC." Lena wiped her hands on her apron, heart thudding, and stepped forward. Frank's smile was warm, his voice a blend of gravel and sunlight. "You must be Lena," he said, extending a hand. She shook it firmly, her voice steady. "Welcome to Harris Diner, Frank." He chuckled, turning to the room, and raised a hand. The latter fell silent, every eye on him. "I want to thank Miss Lena Harris," Frank began, his voice carrying like a sermon. When others turned their backs, she didn't. When they judged a man for a patch, she saw a father. Heads nodded, murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. In our world, loyalty and respect are everything. So let it be known, Harris Diner rides under the protection of the Reapers. Cheers erupted, boots stomping, fists pounding tables, the sound shaking the windows. Lena stood frozen, tears stinging her eyes as the room exploded in applause. She caught Jack's gaze across the crowd, his small, proud smile anchoring her against the overwhelming tide. Frank waited for the noise to settle, then continued, his tone firm but not threatening. "And if anyone in this town has a problem with that, they'll have a problem with all of us." His eyes flicked to Deputy Ellen Hayes, who'd slipped in quietly, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. Ellen swallowed hard, nodding once, her gaze dropping to her hands. Frank grinned, flashing a gold tooth. "Now, who's ready for pie? Heard it's the best in 3 counties." Laughter broke the tension, and Lena hustled to the kitchen, wiping her eyes with her apron as she cut slices of pie, her heart soaring. The diner became a bridge, linking leather and flannel, tattoos and Sunday dresses, in a dance of shared humanity. Outside, Fairview watched. Some still wary, but others drawn in, their steps cautious but deliberate. Lena glanced at the photo of her mother on the wall, Clara's laugh frozen in time, and whispered, "We're doing it, Mama." The Reapers gave her a gift before the day, indeed a leather vest. Black and supple, stitched with Harris Diner, friend of the Reapers, and a smaller patch. Protected. Tucked inside was a note in Jack's uneven scrawl. Tim's treatment's working. He wants to meet you. Thank you. Lena pressed the note to her chest, a giddy relief flooding her, and hung the vest beside her mother's apron, two symbols of courage stitched together. Fairview was changing, and Harris Diner was its beating heart, proof that one act of kindness could spark a revolution. As the last echoes of the Reapers' cheers faded, leaving Harris Diner aglow with newfound life, Lena Harris stood still, her heart grappling with a truth too big to hold. One small act of kindness had rewritten Fairview's story. The leather vest, embroidered with Harris Diner, friend of the Reapers, hung beside her mother's faded apron, a symbol of courage that seemed to pulse with the diner's revived heartbeat. The afternoon sun dipped low, casting golden shadows across the packed booths, where bikers and locals laughed over plates of pie, their voices weaving a tapestry of unlikely harmony. Lena moved through the chaos, refilling coffee mugs and clearing plates, but her mind drifted, replaying the day's miracles, the roar of chrome, Frank Dawson's thunderous vow, Jack Sullivan's quiet smile. She'd stood up for a stranger, defying a town's prejudice, and now that choice was stitching together a community she'd feared was lost. Yet beneath the joy, a quiet question lingered. Had she been brave or simply stubborn? As the crowd thinned, Lena found a moment to breathe, leaning against the counter, her apron stained with coffee and hope. The diner's hum softened, and she closed her eyes, letting the weight of it all settle. She saw her mother's face, Clara's laugh frozen in the photo on the wall, and felt the ache of her absence sharper than ever. Clara had built this place to be a haven, a refuge where anyone could sit and be seen, no matter who they were. Lena had fought to keep that dream alive, even when Fairview turned its back, even when the sign on the door branded her a traitor. She'd been terrified, her hands trembling as she faced Officer Tom Carver, her heart racing when the town's silence became a weapon. But she hadn't backed down, and that choice born from her mother's lessons and a stranger's pain had sparked something extraordinary. Lena opened her eyes, her gaze falling on the vest. Its weight was more than leather. It was a promise, a reminder that courage could ripple beyond the moment it was born. She thought of Jack, his trembling hands and hospital bracelet, his voice breaking as he spoke of Tim. She'd seen him not as a reaper, but as a father, and that simple act had called forth an army of chrome and leather to stand with her. The Reapers' loyalty, their fierce gratitude, had turned her diner into a beacon, a place where Fairview's icy walls began to thaw. She smiled, a small, trembling thing, and whispered to the empty air, "We did it, Mama. You'd be proud." The bell jingled softly, pulling her from her thoughts. Jake Miller poked his head in, his grin wide. "Need a hand cleaning up?" he asked, already grabbing a broom. Lena laughed, the sound lighter than she'd felt in months. "You're hired," she teased, and together they worked, the clatter of dishes a gentle rhythm against the fading day. As they stacked chairs, Lena's mind turned inward again. She'd been scared, yes, but not of Tom Carver or the town's wrath. She'd been scared of failing, of losing the diner, of letting her mother down, of becoming a ghost in Fairview's decay. Standing up for Jack had been a leap into the unknown, a defiance of the town's unspoken rules. But it had also been a stand for something bigger, for the belief that kindness could heal, that one voice could shift the tide. The Reapers had seen her, not as a struggling diner owner, but as a woman who'd chosen grace over judgment, and their support had given her the strength to keep going. Lena paused, her hands stilling on a stack of plates, and looked around. The diner was hers now, not just Clara's, a living testament to the power of seeing people for who they are, not what they wear. She thought of the note from Jack, tucked inside the vest. "Tim's treatment's working. He wants to meet you." Her heart swelled, a giddy relief mixing with pride. She'd made a difference, not just for Jack, but for Tim, for the Reapers, for Fairview. The town wasn't perfect, change came slow, and some would always cling to old ways, but today, Harris Diner had become a bridge, linking leather and flannel, fear and trust, in a dance of shared humanity. As she locked up that night, the vest gleaming under the diner's soft lights, Lena felt a fierce certainty settle in her bones. She'd been afraid, but fear hadn't won. She'd stood up, and that act had called forth a community, a family, a future. She glanced at her mother's photo, Clara's eyes seeming to shine with approval, and whispered, "I've got this, Mama. I've got your heart." The stars above Fairview glittered, bright against the summer night, and Lena stepped into the quiet, carrying a hope that burned brighter than fear. She wasn't alone anymore. The diner, the reapers, the town slowly waking to change, they were with her. Proof that one small act could spark a fire to light the world. Tomorrow, she'd open the doors again, pour coffee, flip pancakes, and keep building that bridge, one plate at a time. Harris Diner wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And Lena Harris, with her mother's lessons and a leather vest to prove it, was ready for whatever came next. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she'd walk it with the strength of those who'd stood with her, and the memory of a father's gratitude that had changed everything. With the stars above Fairview bearing witness to Lena Harris's unyielding resolve, Harris Diner stood as a testament to the power of a single act of courage, its lights burning bright against the fading night. The leather vest, emblazoned with Friend of the Reapers, hung beside Clara's apron, a quiet vow that Lena would carry her mother's dream forward, no matter the odds. The days that followed the Reapers' arrival unfolded like a new chapter, each sunrise bringing a steadier rhythm to the diner's pulse. Locals returned, their steps cautious at first, drawn by the buzz of a place that had become more than a dinera symbol of change in a town long frozen by prejudice. Travelers stopped by, their maps marked with whispers of the little eatery with the big heart, and bikers passing through Ohio tipped generously, their reaper patches glinting as they nodded to Lena with quiet respect. The cash register, once a harbinger of despair, now chimed with a fullness that eased the knot in Lena's chest, enough to cover the electric bill and Clara's medication, with a little left to dream again. Sarah Klein became a regular, her lesson plans joined by pie recipes she traded with Lena, her laughter brighter than it had been in years. Jake Miller brought his kids on weekends, their eyes wide as they marveled at the chrome bikes lining Main Street, their giggles mingling with the clatter of plates. Even Deputy Ellen Hayes started dropping by in plain clothes, her badge left at home, her coffee orders paired with tentative smiles that spoke of a thawing heart. Harris Diner was no longer just surviving, it was thriving, its booths filled with a mosaic of faces, its air thick with the scent of fresh coffee and second chances. Lena moved through it all, flipping pancakes, pouring coffee, listening to stories of harvests, road trips, and dreams reborn. Each glance at the vest on the wall stirred a fierce pride in her chest, a reminder that she'd stood up when it mattered, and that choice had changed everything. Yet, amid the bustle, a quieter moment came one evening, as the sun dipped below Fairview's rooftops, painting the sky in purples and golds. Lena stood on the diner's front steps, her apron still tied crooked, arms crossed loosely, watching the last of the day's customers drift into the twilight. The hum of the diner behind her softened, dishes stacked, chairs aligned, the vest and apron glowing under the soft lights. She closed her eyes, breathing in the mingled scents of pie, leather, and summer dust, a fragrance that smelled like hope. A soft, throat-clearing broke her reverie, and she turned to find Jack Sullivan standing there, his jacket less dusty now, his eyes brighter than the day they'd met. "Hey," he said, voice gruff but warm. "Got a minute?" Lena smiled, stepping closer. "Always." Jack shifted, pulling a small photo from his pocket, a boy, maybe 10, with his father's hazel eyes, grinning from a hospital bed. "Tim," Jack said, his voice thick. "Treatment's working. Early signs, but he's fighting." Lena's breath caught, a giddy relief flooding her chest. "That's incredible, Jack," she said, and without thinking, she pulled him into a fierce hug. He stiffened for a heartbeat, then hugged her back, strong and sure. When they parted, Jack's eyes glistened. "He wants to meet you," he said. "Says you sound like someone he'd like to be when he grows up." Lena blinked hard, tears threatening to spill. "I'd love that," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Jack nodded, slipping the photo back into his pocket, and glanced at the diner. "You did something here, Lena, something big." She followed his gaze, her heart swelling at the sight of the place that had held her mother's dreams and now carried her own. "We did it together," she said softly. Jack smiled, a rare, unguarded thing, and walked into the night, his boots echoing on the pavement. Lena lingered on the steps, the weight of the moment settling over her like a warm blanket. She thought of Clara, of the lessons that had guided her judged by deeds, not looks, and how they'd led her to this. She'd stood up for Jack, a stranger in a reaper's jacket, because she'd seen his heart, not his patch. That choice had called forth a community, broken down walls, and given Fairview a chance to heal. The town wasn't perfect. Some still whispered, some still judged. But Harris Diner had become a bridge, a place where differences dissolved over shared meals, where courage and compassion forged bonds stronger than prejudice. Lena's eyes drifted to the sky, the stars brighter now, and she felt her mother's presence, a quiet pride that steadied her. This was the lesson. One small act, a cup of coffee, a kind word, a refusal to look away could spark a revolution. It wasn't about erasing the past or silencing the skeptics. It was about showing up, standing tall, and offering a seat at the table. Harris Diner was proof of that, a living testament to the power of seeing people, not patches, and believing in the good that could grow from it. Lena stepped back inside, the bell jingling softly, and locked the door. Tomorrow, she'd open again, serve breakfast, and keep building that bridge, one plate at a time. Fairview was changing, and she was its heartbeat, carrying her mother's love, the reaper's loyalty, and a hope that burned brighter than any fear. Harris Diner wasn't just a place, it was a promise, a legacy, a light that would guide the town toward a better future, one cup of coffee at a time. As the lights of Harris Diner glowed softly against the Fairview night, I, Lena Harris, stood on the steps of my mother's dream, my heart full with a truth that changed everything. When I chose to see Jack Sullivan as a reaper, but as a father fighting for his son, I didn't just stand up to a town's prejudice. I lit a spark that set Fairview ablaze with hope. That moment, born from a simple act of kindness, taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. I was terrified, facing Officer Tom Carver's sneer, the town's cold silence, and that hateful sign on my door. But I heard my mother's voice judged by deeds, not looks, and it carried me through. When the Reapers roared into Fairview, their chrome and leather a testament to loyalty, they didn't just save my diner. They showed me that one voice, one choice, can call forth a community strong enough to break down walls. Seeing Tim's photo, knowing he's fighting and winning, filled me with a joy that words can't hold. Harris Diner isn't just a place to eat anymore, it's a bridge, a promise that we can see each other, truly see each other, beyond patches, skin, or scars. The lesson here is simple but profound. A single act of compassion can change a heart, a town, maybe even the world. It's not about erasing differences or silencing doubters. It's about showing up, offering a seat at the table, and believing that kindness can heal what fear divides. Fairview's still learning, and so am I. But every cup of coffee I pour, every smile I share, builds that bridge a little stronger. This diner, my mother's legacy, taught me that when we choose to see the person, not the label, we create a ripple that can become a revolution in plate, one moment, one heart at a time. If Lena's story touched you, if it reminded you of the power we all hold to make a difference, please hit that like button to spread this message further. Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, your stories, or just a word of hope. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to join us for more tales that inspire, uplift, and show the incredible things that happen when we choose courage over fear. Let's keep building bridges together, one story at a time.